Welcome, everyone, to Joy in the Journey podcast. I'm so excited to be sitting in front of Misty, and we're just going to have a chat, guys. I just want to welcome her here. She is the mother of a 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old son, Jed, and she also has a 5-year-old son. And we're just going to chat about her Down syndrome story. This is our 4th episode, so I am so happy that she was able to just come on and share her story, and I just cannot wait to hear from her. So welcome, Misty.
Oh, thank you so much, Josie. It's so good to be here.
Awesome. All right. So, okay. When you found out the Down syndrome diagnosis, was it before you had your son or was it after he was born? Can you share like a little bit about that?
Yeah, I found out about 14 weeks when I was 14 weeks pregnant, and my husband and I hadn't done any testing with my first son, Clay, because um, you know, we just said, we get what we get, but this time I wanted to with Jed, I wanted to find out if it was a girl because the pregnancy felt really different from Clay, and so I thought, well, we'll just do the NIPT test to see if we can know if it's a girl. And I did notice that it sort of took a while to get the results. I like signed on to the portal and I was calling them and I wasn't getting any response.
Mhm.
And so a few weeks after we got tested, I received a call from my OB telling me that he had a 9 of 10 chance of having,
Wow.
and they just said trisomy 21, which at the time I'd heard, but I was like, "You mean Down syndrome?" And she said, "Yes."
Mm. So
And
you kind of knew what the term meant.
I did, like, I'd heard it before, but, when you're in shock, like, words don't really make
Right.
sense, and
Right.
so I needed clarification.
Hmm.
Um, and I initially was devastated. I can go further into that, but in that initial moment, it felt like I was like underwater.
Yeah. And so just hearing that, I can relate because with all of my other children that I've had, Christian is the fourth one. I have 5 altogether. He's the fourth. And with my kids prior to Christian, I never got any testing done just because, like you, whatever we get, we get, and I would be happy. It was just always in our minds as a blessing from God, right? And so when we got pregnant with Christian, I was like, oh, let's get the test done to find out the gender. And same thing, we wanted to find out what it was early on. And then when we got the news that he was in, I think it was about 76 percentile in possibly having Down syndrome, we were like, what? Like, we had no clue what Down syndrome meant, what it was, how, a child gets Down syndrome. Like, we had so many questions running through. So I can totally relate to exactly how you felt
Yeah,
in that moment.
yeah.
Um,
It's
but I
pretty.
do
It's
want to know. Go ahead.
it's pretty scary. I
It's
mean, when you don't
scary. It
have any
definitely is
point of
scary.
reference at all.
Right. And this is why I wanted to do like a podcast, and I'm so glad that like so many women nowadays are sharing their stories with Down syndrome, because I feel like we didn't have that. I felt like when we were, pregnant with Christian, it was like no one in our circle has Down syndrome. Like, what is this, And we didn't have the support. They were just handed you a book with Down syndrome. Here's everything you need to know about Down syndrome. And then we just kind of like had to learn on our own. And
Mhm.
so this is why I mostly, wanted to do this podcast for mothers like yourself and myself to just come on and truly share from the heart your real life Down syndrome stories, because I'm sure that in some way or another, we all can relate in some
Mhm.
shape or form, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What are some of the challenges like on a day to day that you face as a parent of a child with Down syndrome?
In so many ways, being a mom to Jed is really similar to being a mom to Clay. Just it's tiring. It's tiring to be a mom, as a mom of
Yeah.
5. It's exhausting. I think it's a sacrificial job. It's a lot of like, death to self and like, okay,
Yeah.
God, like I don't know how to do this. You have to have this. I think the biggest differences with Jed came obviously during my pregnancy, having that knowledge of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a child the disability,
Yeah.
that was the pregnancy was vastly, vastly different. Not to mention, I was pregnant during the pandemic.
Mm.
I got the news 2 weeks before the whole world shut down.
Wow.
And then just couldn't be around people, couldn't have, showers. I ended up having like a couple Zoom showers, which were so special, but like
Aw.
it was such a bizarre time to then have this life altering news. So the pregnancy was vastly different than my first son. And now having him, I would say, there are, as you very well know, with Christian, there are sometimes health things that come with the
Yeah.
diagnosis. Not always, which I like to clarify because I think
Yes.
that many people assume, oh my gosh, they're going to suffer and they're going to have
Right.
like horrible heart defects. And really, it's 50% of our kids have heart defects, but there is no way of guaranteeing that they're going to have health issues or not. It's really sort of a gamble with our kids. And so Jed, he was born, he sort of had some failure to thrive at the end of my pregnancy, so he was born very small and
Mm.
did have to be in the NICU, which was different than my first son. He also suffered from infantile spasms at 6 months old, and those are super, super, super rare. Only 6% of our kids get those.
Wow.
It had to be treated this really intense like steroid treatment, and that was really intense.
Mhm.
Just like talk about unknowns, just whoa. And then I would say, the hospital stays we've had where he'll just get like a couple viruses and they land him. He just in January and February were in the hospital for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Thank you for he needed oxygen. And so I think that's the biggest just sort of like learning curve is that
Mhm.
for things for typical children that might not be that big of a thing for our kids can be, really a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what contributes to the fear, don't you think, with our
Yes.
diagnosis?
Yes, and with Christian, what made me more afraid was, we get I don't know if you got, but we got a lot of scans, like more than any of our other children, like ultrasounds, like in-depth scans of like every part of his body, his brain, his heart. And that was very different for me. And a lot of times after those scans, they would come to me and tell me that, Christian was going to have a lot of heart issues, brain issues. And I was terrified. I'm like, oh my goodness. They would tell me like, hey, abort because he's going to pretty much be a vegetable. There's no point for him to live. And I'm like, no, I'm not aborting my son. And thank God that I did not abort my son, because who knows how many moms go through with that process, being so afraid that their child's going to be a vegetable. And look at Christian. Yeah, he had cancer and he's overcome it. Praise God for that. But if I would have been scared of the news from the doctors, I would have been like, oh no, my son's going to have heart issues, brain issues. So I just think it's best that we just kind of like terminate the pregnancy, which, like I don't know how many moms really go through just thinking that these doctors are always 100% correct. And sometimes they may not be. So that was a lot of the fear that I dealt with like during my pregnancy, was the fear of what if, right? And so
You're so right. You bring up a really good point that I feel like, in order to equip women and families, you need to give the full scope, not
yeah,
just this is the terrible things that could
yes,
happen, or what when you Google, like those things can and do happen. However, you have parents like you and me who have experienced radical joy through our kids
yeah,
and have been changed from the inside out, and you don't hear the doctor sure doesn't tell you those stories.
right.
And so that's why we need to do this. That's why we're here.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. What are some of the joys and rewards of parenting a child with Down syndrome, which is a great time for this question?
Good segue. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many. I could talk about the joys of Jed all day long.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, I really think, you know, so much of his spirit is just, I don't believe in magic, but I don't
right.
know a better word to say. Like he has a joy. He is like joy personified. And he has this way about him that he just walks into a room and he immediately, it's like he like slams down people's walls, just like, okay, you're gonna put up a wall, I'm gonna slam it down. He just he is he brings us so much joy.
I love that.
He slows us down in the best way possible. Like,
Yes.
I think the timing of my particular journey is not lost on me, that I'm a go, 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 future driven, next thing on my list type of person. And all of a sudden, I'm pregnant with a child with Down syndrome in a pandemic, and I
Mm.
have no choice but to slow down, to put on the brakes, to
Wow.
listen, to be present, to deal with all the things up here and in here.
That's so
And
good.
it's that's like, ugh, like we don't want to do that, right? Because we
Yeah.
have so much stuff, all of us, no matter how we were raised, no matter what, if we have a faith or not, like all of us, I think, feel that deep like deep sort of heart's cry, you
Yeah.
know, to connect with others, to heal from
Mm.
past things. And Jed just is my gift. Like, he's my gift from God, that
Yes.
he he really helps me do that. You know, he really has sort of brought me to my knees in the best way
Mhm.
possible. And it is such a joy. I'm sure you know, as when
Yes.
working on something, like crawling or walking or sitting up, or little things, and then all of a sudden he'll do it, like after we've been working and working and working and working.
Yes.
I never used to rejoice the way that I do, with my first son, the way that I do with Jed, because it just came so naturally to him. He
Right.
was ahead of the curve, and I was like, oh, he's got this. With Jed, it's like everything.
Make
I
sure to appreciate every tiny
celebrate.
little milestone.
Yes. And isn't that a gift, like, in this world where things are so, like, dark and cynical so much of the time, to be able
Mhm.
to just celebrate, like, the beautiful, simple victories and joys in life. So, I mean, that pretty much encapsulates the joy.
I love how you put that all, like, it was just beautifully said, and I can relate and agree 1,000% with you. It's so real. Everything that
Yeah,
you said is so, so real, honestly.
yeah.
I really wanna know, for the dads out there, how did your husband take the diagnosis? How was his reaction during pregnancy and even afterwards?
Yeah. My husband, so after I got that call that I described earlier, like I said, I felt like I was underwater, and it felt like the Charlie Brown voice. It was like, wah, 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 wah. I couldn't understand what she was saying to me. And so it
Mhm.
just so happened, by the grace of God, that my husband, it was the middle of the day. He should have been at work, but he was home for some reason. And I walked down the stairs. I literally felt like I couldn't walk, like I couldn't feel my legs
Mhm.
underneath me. And I sort of just like collapsed, like in
Wow.
a puddle in the middle of the floor. And he came over, and I couldn't get the words out for a couple of minutes. And when I finally did, it was like, open the floodgates. They think he
Mm,
has Down syndrome. I can't do this. Like, my head was like, my life is over. I'm gonna. And this is me, who really believes in the beauty and sanctity of life. I was saying things like, I don't want this. I can't do this. I'm scared. This is the end of my life. Just
mm,
basically just like throwing up these words.
mhm,
And my husband is the opposite of me, like a man of few words. And what he says, he really, really, really means. He doesn't say a
mhm,
thing that he doesn't mean. And he just said, I said, I can't do this. And he said, we can do this. We will do this. This is our baby, and we will love it.
mm.
Just like one, two sentences, just like brought
And
me
it
right.
was just enough.
It was what I needed. I needed a
Mm,
steady, like, truth spoken to me.
yeah.
Because I think what happens, and I've said this to a lot of moms who are pregnant, you think your fear is diagnosis. Your fear
Mhm,
is sickness. Your fear is like this idea that you have in your head of Down syndrome. You're not
Mhm.
thinking about that precious baby that is going to like rock your world. You're, at least I wasn't. I was thinking
Mhm.
about the dark like ideas that were floating
Right.
around in my head. And so for him just to say, this is our baby and we will love him, just brought me right back home, right back to where I needed to be. Now, I will say that when we met with our genetic counselor a couple days later, which I sort of feel was my turning point, when I had someone like face to face with me, giving me resources,
Mhm.
that was kind of my turning point where I went from like real extreme grief to like, okay, buckle up. Like, I'm going to do
Mm.
it. And I would say that, so we chose not to do an amnio. Um, and so we had that 9 of 10 chance. So there was still that like little, I think like sliver, but I got rid of that sliver of thinking that he wasn't going to have Down syndrome very soon. My
Mm.
I think hung on a little. He didn't tell me that, but he hung on a little thinking, well, they could be wrong. You never know, but these
Yeah.
tests are pretty accurate. And when he was born, I think he had a personal like grief moment of like,
Mm.
oh, I think I held on to this thought that maybe he wouldn't, and now he does. But
Wow.
that, even that was like shattered when Jed would look at us at a day old, and mind you, tiny little 5 pound baby
Mm.
who had like an infection that needed to go to the NICU. He would look at us with this strength and this I know you, I see you, like it
Aw.
just like piercing. And he just in tears, my husband was like, the way he looks at me. And I said,
Mm.
no, I know, it's like mind blowing. So I think he had like maybe a moment or two of grief, thinking maybe it was wrong, but Jed just like, once again, walls came tumbling down, you know?
That's so sweet. And I'm glad you share that about your husband because my husband too is an amazing supporter and like your husband, man of few words that he kind of like just sits and takes it all in. I'm more like a vocal, like everything just has to come out. I don't process right away a lot of times where he sits and processes everything. Um but also, the fact that you were able to share that your husband had real feelings as well, because that just lets us know that we're human, right? He's
Mhm.
human. And although he was the strong one or the manly, or he accepted him even before he was even born, he was even still able to kind of like have those feelings and process that, but it was only for a moment.
Yep.
um
Yep.
and these kids, they mean so much to us. They truly, truly change our entire world.
Yes.
With that being said, how did your son take to the fact that his son or his brother had Down syndrome? Did he understand? How did you explain it in a, child's perspective for him to be able to understand?
So my son Clay was only about Jed's age when Jed was born. So very young, two and a half.
Mhm.
We didn't really, I want to say maybe someone bought us a book about Down syndrome that we might have read to him when he was little. We didn't really have like big, epic long talks about it. I would say we just started diving in maybe last year when he was like 4-ish, like
Mhm.
just turned 4. We were like, okay, Clay can probably, he'll say things like, oh, Jed has beautiful, um, what does he say? Not half eye, moon eyes or something. Like
Oh.
he made an observation about his eyes. And we said, yeah, that's a lot of times people with Down syndrome, which is what brother has, will have beautiful almond shaped eyes. Aren't they beautiful? And we like talk about them. We talk about, he'll comment sometimes, and some of his friends have commented about, Jed likes to put his tongue out a lot. And I'll say, yeah, he does. I said, but he has something called hypotonia. Can you say that? And he'll say hypotonia. I say, it just means that it's not that he's not strong. He's one of the strongest kids I've ever met, but he has, it's like an elongate. I'll kind of like explain what our physical therapist told us, which is
Right.
just that their muscles are more like it's like having a long stick is harder to pick up than a short stick because it's almost like stretched out like a rope. That's how she explained it to
I
me.
love that.
We talked about it, and I said, "So it just means it's gonna sometimes take him longer to figure stuff out, and we're here to support him, and we're here to be here with him." And Clay just stepped up to the plate, like,
Mm,
from day one. Like, this kid was born to be a big brother,
yeah,
and he takes his hand and he says, "Come on, Jen." I mean, he's a kid, he gets annoyed by things sometimes, but he, for the most part, is so protective of him and
yes.
has this fierce sort of like, just it's like he gets it without
Mhm.
even getting it.
Yeah,
He's 5, but he get something clicks for him. I can already tell. And so we talk about it sometimes. We read some books. We talk about differences, not just with Down syndrome. We talk about differences,
mhm.
and we don't shy away from talking about that because there's 5-year-olds ask uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's good. Like, okay, this is a safe place. Ask those questions. Let's talk
Yes.
about it, right?
Better in the home than out, right?
Yes, exactly. But even when I have friends whose kids will ask questions about Jed, and you can see they're just like mortified, just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "No, no, no, it's okay. Don't be sorry. Let's talk about this."
Yeah.
Not everyone feels that way, but I just feel like kids just want to know. They have like a genuine curiosity. So I'm
Mhm.
not going to be offended by something a 5-year-old asks me. I'd rather he know
Right.
now than when he's 25, you
I
know?
totally agree. Absolutely. I agree. I agree to the max. One day, not too long ago, maybe about a year ago, we were in ShopRite, and there was a little girl walking by, and Christian, he lost his hair during cancer, but then it came back, and then he lost it again about a year after cancer, and he has alopecia.
Hmm.
So the little girl walks by, and she's like, I didn't hear her, my older son heard her, and she was like, look, mom, he has cancer. And my son told me after we walked away, and I was just like, oh, did she say that? But kids are so observant. Like, they're so much smarter than we even think. They're
Mhm.
so observant. And I, like you, I want kids to ask questions. I rather them not be mean or cruel. But if you have a question, ask, because I am so willing to just kind of like share, and I'm open to you learning and
Yes.
understanding what it is. Why does he look different than you, and things like that. So I love how you explain, to your older son Clay and his friends, about your son. My 9-year-old, he's very, very close to Christian.
Easy.
And yeah, he adores Christian. They all do, but they're a little closer in age. And so he's like his protector. If I can't, then like Javion's like bathing him and dressing him and like feeding him and helping me out with him. He's like protecting him. And I just love the bond that they share. It's
Yeah.
just so special to see.
How old is Christian again?
Christian is 6 now.
6. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, he's 6. So talk a little bit about how important it is for early intervention.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so early intervention, one of those things again where you're just like, if you don't know, you don't know. I have a lot of
Yeah.
friends now who in the Down syndrome community who are either speech therapists or have had physical therapy. They know a lot more about it than I did. I knew nothing, nothing,
Mm,
nothing, nothing. And so coming out of the hospital, out of the NICU where I'd had my second C-section. I was recovering from that. I was like dealing with all the newborn stuff. And I am really grateful, and I would love to hear your experience on this too. I'm really
mhm,
grateful that we live in a state here in Jersey that happens to have a pretty stellar, I guess it's based on your county, but in
mhm.
our county, we have a pretty stellar early intervention program. And I just felt like, in so many ways, I was like handed a silver platter of wonderful therapists.
Mhm.
That we I knew nothing. And so I did all the Zoom, because again, still pandemic, all the
Yeah.
Zoom like introductions and like sign the papers and whatever. And then it felt like, okay, so here's your PT and here's your DI and here's your speech therapist and here you go. And I mean, he started gosh, between 6 to 8 weeks, he was teeny, teeny tiny, and we
Yeah.
started right away, and it was hard. It was really hard because here we were, there was only one that met in person. We met with, over Zoom with our other ones, and I
Wow.
was like, "What am I supposed to do? Like, I don't know anything about this. Like, here's this baby,
Mm,
and he can't really do much." So, the beginning was really difficult, but I'm so grateful that I had really seasoned therapists
mhm.
who just sort of we just sort of rode the weird train together of like, what is this virtual stuff?
Yeah.
And I really feel like anytime I had a transition with a therapist who had to leave for whatever reason, I very quickly got a new one. And so I'm so grateful for that. But yeah, I mean, I feel like early intervention is absolutely a game changer. For We are so lucky in our country because, running the platform I do, Happiness is Down Syndrome, I hear from people in Iraq and India.
Mm,
I mean, they don't have it. They don't have it.
right.
And so the fact that we get it and that we give our kids a leg up early on, it's such
Mhm.
a blessing. It really
That's
is.
amazing. I give you credit for doing the virtual because I don't think I could do that
It's so
with the
hard.
therapy. Christian started at about 4 weeks old, and again, he also had all his therapists were seasoned. Thank God for that. When I tell you he had amazing therapists, like I still honestly keep in contact with like two of his therapists because we love them so much. And I'm like constantly sending them pictures and updates of Christian now. And he stopped when he was 3 years old. And it was literally like right before the pandemic started. He was like aging out already. Um, but he started 4 weeks old, and it was the best thing we could have ever done early on. And they'd come to the house, do what they had to do. We would sit and talk for hours after his sessions. Like they were great, they were great. Then when he was 3, he aged out, and then we went to a facility in person, so we would go to the facility,
Mhm.
and they did great there with him too. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it wasn't as great. I wouldn't say it was as great as, the in-home, because I love those therapists like a lot more, like in regards to their knowledge and helping
Yeah,
Christian out. But it was great for what he needed at that time. And so I'm just so thankful. And I just look, if they give it to you, take it because it's absolutely necessary. And yeah, like you said, grateful, grateful, grateful that we at least have access to those services.
100%.
Yeah.
We're so lucky. I'm so glad your experience was that way too.
Yes. So share, you brought up for the last few minutes we have, I want you to share your Happiness is Down Syndrome platform. What's that about? Explain it, share where they can find you.
Yeah. So as I shared in the beginning, like I felt like my life was going to be over, my dreams were going to be over, I was going to have no friends. Like I literally just felt like, okay, that's it, my life is over, I'm going to be alone. And
Mm,
my head went to these really extreme places. And so because of that, and now knowing what I know with Jed, I mean, really within days, the joy that enraptured me with Jed was so altering that I could feel like this is going to be the end of my life, and then looking at him and being like, this is my life,
yes, yes.
it was so life altering that I woke up in the middle of the night, and my background's in musical theater, so I studied classical theater, musical theater, and did acting in New York and LA. And one of the musicals that I love so much is You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And one of the songs is called Happiness. And it talks about happiness in the simple things. Happiness is
Mhm.
finding a pencil. Happiness is getting an ice cream. Happiness is telling a secret to your friend. Happiness, all these like simple joys. And I woke up in the middle of the night. Nobody woke me up. Baby was sleeping, husband was sleeping, son was
Mhm.
sleeping, and I just couldn't stop singing the song. I was like, this is Jed. This is Jed. This is my
Mm,
experience with Jed. And I kept thinking about the other moms who'd just given birth that had the same sort of sentiments. And this
yeah.
like montage was running through my head of moms pushing their kids on a swing, moms walking through the park. And just this simple, beautiful joy. And
Mm.
so I decided I wanted to do a project where I was going to have moms film themselves with their children, and we were going to put it together. And I sang the song and had it arranged and made a video and did a YouTube thing. And I talked to somebody who recommended making a Instagram page. So if people saw the video on YouTube, they could go on Instagram and see these stories
Right.
projected there. And so, I mean, at that point, a star was born in Happiness is Down syndrome. Literally, like
Aw.
the stories were just like pouring in. People want the way you and I are
Mhm.
talking. People want to share it
Yeah.
because you don't know what you don't know, and when
Yeah.
you do know, you want to be like here, you know. And
Yeah.
so, that's what Happiness is Down syndrome is. It's just families and women like you and I, and then we've featured men before your husband's on the page. I want you on the page, please.
Yes.
Um, but within the first few months of the page being up, I wanted to do all men for Father's Day, and
That's
so
so cool.
I featured your husband and like 29 other men, which was so special to hear their perspective. But it's just stories. Then we have like Teacher Tuesday, which is like resources about learning from teachers. And then we have Therapy Thursday, which is real therapists coming on and giving tips to
That's
people
so
in other
cool.
countries who might not have it, and even people
Yeah.
here who just want some extra, right? And so we have that. And then we have, it would be great to have you share, Josie, on We Share Our Story Wednesday, where I just have women do like, a 1 minute video of like, this is what it was like, and this is what it's like now with their child. Um,
Wow.
and just hearing them talk, it really, really makes a difference when you are a person who's pregnant and you
Mm.
go on and you see someone like you know, you're like, hey, that family kind of looks like us. They kind of
Yes.
like us. And all of a sudden that fear gets stripped
Right.
because you see people like you doing the thing, you know?
Mhm. I
So
love that.
that's
I love that. So follow her guys on Instagram. Happiness is Down syndrome. I love that.
yes. And then
Um,
I have my personal page, Misty Snyder, with that shows all of Jed's shenanigans.
yes, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So for our last question, if you had a mother in front of you right now who was kind of battling, the thoughts of possibly terminating or not, and she was kind of stuck, what are some words that you can give her to encourage her on why it's important to, just kind of like go through with this pregnancy and allowing her to know that there is joy in the journey.
I love Joy in the Journey. I
Thank
love your
you.
title. It's so perfect. So I it's perfect timing because I just spoke to a mom last week and considering this very thing. And um, one of the things I said was just know, like, feel what you feel. Don't shame yourself. Feel what you feel. Allow yourself to feel all the things because if you
Yeah.
push it down, it's just going to come up worse. Feel all the things, cry all the tears, talk to the people who love you, pray, pause, all the things. Once you've done that, know and hear and acknowledge how you feel now will not always be how you feel.
Mm,
It's okay to grieve right now,
yeah.
but I promise you, it will not always be this way. You have to take things one day at a time. And during my pregnancy, I didn't think about, I'll have people say to me on Instagram, well, what about when he's 40 years old? And I'm like, when he's 40 years old, I'm just thinking about what we're going to get through today. Like,
Yes.
I feel like that's what life is. Like, none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. None of
Yeah.
us. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, 40 years old, we'll talk about that in 40 years. But for right now, I'm going to deal with what's right in front of me. So when I was
Amen.
pregnant, that meant looking at my calendar and being like, okay, this Thursday, I'm going to the cardiologist. Okay. I'm
Yes.
focusing, I'm praying I'm thinking about that appointment. And I would go and it would be good. And we would deal with what we needed to deal with. And then I'd check that off and I wouldn't even think about it.
Mm,
I'd be on to the next appointment. And to me, that is a really healthy way to live, Down syndrome diagnosis or not. One day
yeah.
at a time in the moment, dealing with what you can do because we are not meant as human beings to deal with
Yeah.
things 40 years down the
Yeah.
road, even a day down the road. You make plans and God laughs. It's like
Yes.
you do your best with what you've been given. So what I told her was
Right.
just focus on today, breathe, don't rush. Do not rush into any sort of decision, because
Mm,
people don't talk about. The one thing she said was, has anyone ever told you that they regret having their baby with Down syndrome? And I
wow.
said, no, I have never heard
Me
anyone even
either.
come close to uttering that. I have heard someone say, I regret not having my baby. I have heard. So
Wow.
it is your decision, but you cannot rush. It's
Mhm.
your this is your life. This is your life. And
Yeah.
so don't rush, breathe, pray, pause, talk to all the people, watch all the podcasts, and give yourself grace.
Amen. Amen. I've never honestly, and I'm not saying this just because we're on a platform, and I'm not saying it just because we have our kids with Down syndrome, honestly, because I would never do that. I never heard anyone regret having their child with Down syndrome, honestly.
I haven't
Never.
even heard anyone allude to it, like, "Ooh, I'm
Yeah, me
afraid to say it
either.
out loud." Not even close. Everybody, even when they're in the trenches of difficult, when
Yeah.
you were in the trenches with Christian, and you were barely able to, like, sleep and survive, did you for a moment think, I I I wish we weren't on this, I wish we didn't have him? Like, no. You
Never.
I mean, like, right?
Never, never.
Such a gift.
I always hear from anyone I've ever spoken to, whether they're young or old, and with a child with Down syndrome, that they have changed their lives. They're the light and love of their lives. They're a true blessing. Like
Yes.
all those great things, and it's just been amazing, honestly.
Yes.
So I would
Yes.
not change it for the world, honestly.
Me
So
neither. Me neither. That I'm so grateful you're giving me an opportunity to talk about it, because any
of
chance I can.
course,
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so
I
much.
loved hearing your story. I could sit and talk to you for hours.
Well, we
How
live
you
close,
brought.
so we'll have to do it.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Honestly, it was
Yes.
great.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming on. And give Jed a hug and a kiss from us.
And Christian too. And you're beautiful. You just had a new baby, right?
Yes, yes, Hezekiah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Such a beautiful
Thank you.
family.
Thank you so much. All right, Misty, we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, give me 1 second, Misty.
Okay.